episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 227, being recorded on Sunday, August 9th, 2026, on a lovely Sunday morning. It has been pretty hot lately. Some days have been far more manageable than others, but this morning the sun is out. It's a nice, cool, kind of warm breeze in the air. I had to step outside briefly, but it feels very nice. There's a whole day of opportunity ahead of us and ahead of you whenever you're listening to this, or night whenever you're listening to this, or opportunity kind of lays in front of you to work on your craft, work on your art, work on whatever it is that needs to be worked on. There's a lot to do here, and including that is recording this episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. And the cat just walked in. Where is she gonna go? Probably to the window, don't you know? Yep, there she is. I wish I had a visual eye I could put on this. A visual eye. Isn't that a reductive statement? I wish I had a visual to put on this. But anyways, films to talk about, filmmakers to talk about, so much to talk about, and in a half-hour time span. So, I'm going to briefly talk about, before I start talking, I'll get a sip of water here. Good lord. We're going to briefly talk about the new Hirokaza Koreeda film, which premiered at Cannes a couple months ago. He has a film every couple of years, and his new film, Sheep in the Box, I just saw. Like I said, premiered at Cannes this past couple months, and I wish I could find the actual. Excuse me. I wish I could find the little chart that I saw online where people were looking at the films that were up for the Palme d'Or and the response they had been receiving. And Sheep in the Box was the least well received out of them. I think it got something like a 1 point whatever, which is all arbitrary. I mean, we have no context to these films, so it's just about seeing, this filmmaker has a new film out, and how is it being received, as well as, I am not familiar with this film, but it is being well received or not well received. Ultimately, it does not matter. It's more of a curiosity, but this was not well received, and I have been such a fan of Hirokazu Koreeda's films. He's been on a streak for me this past couple of feature films. Monster from 2023, which was phenomenal. Broker from 2022, which may be my favorite of his work. I haven't seen The Truth from 2019. That was an English film, or an English-speaking film he did with Ethan Hawke, Catherine Deneuve, Juliette Binoche. But then he won the Palme d'Or in 2018 for Shoplifters, which is a very good film as well. I haven't seen all of his films. I've seen a handful. I've seen Nobody Knows and Afterlife, Still Walking, so I still have a couple more to see. But the point is, though, is I'm a big fan of Hirokazu Koreeda, and was looking forward to this. Wasn't super familiar with it in terms of the setup. I knew maybe a little bit about it, but I walked in mostly blind. And it's funny, I was sitting there, and it made me think of Nicholas Winding Refn's Her Private Hell. And I should also say, I've been pronouncing Nicholas Winding Refn's name incorrectly probably since the start of the show. I saw a little, I saw like a four favorites with Letterboxd, and he pronounced his name, and I said, oh my gosh, I've been calling him the wrong name for so long. Same with Leia Seydoux. I've been calling her Leah Seydoux for so long now. So hopefully you know who I'm talking about when I say some of these names and possibly saying them incorrectly. But anyways, I talked about Nicholas Winding Refn's Her Private Hell. It had been pretty poorly received at Cannes. It wasn't in the main competition. It wasn't an official competition. I forgot what side competition it was in, but it got poor reviews. Came out. I was getting some clickbait sort of videos that I made a point, don't recommend me to stuff like this, because I was getting stuff like, I've seen 30 films this year. This was the worst one, and I walked out of this movie. This movie's horrible. That's all just kind of clickbait farming. That seems like such performative film criticism. Regardless if one dislikes the film, that's their right, that's their prerogative. But you always see those videos that are like worst film of the year, and it's like, well, you just called the film that came out last week the worst film of the year, and now this now is the worst film of the year. What's going to happen next week? So it's just you. That's all like vomit to me. That's all like you can't you smell it and you stay far away from it. But my point is that with Her Private Hell, I walked in, Nicholas Winding Refn, another one of my favorite filmmakers, and I loved that film. And you could say, well, you love these filmmakers, so you're just ready to love it. And that's not true. I think there is a certain expectation of, ooh, this filmmaker who I like, or I'm a big fan of his work or her work, and they have a new film out. I'm looking forward to it, but it's not a case where I'm just ready to like it. I think about another Neon distributed film that came out uh, from Julia DeCarno, or is it Julie DeCarno? I don't remember, but she did a film I really loved called Titan, and she did a new film, Alpha, which I wasn't crazy about, but I saw a lot of promise in that. So that's one as well. I'm not going to walk in and just say, and obviously, I like Refn and Koreeda's films more, but I'm just saying of a recent example because Sheep in the Box is also a Neon distributed film. And like Alpha, they seemingly buried this. This really is not playing around much around me. If you go on a tip for you, pro tip, if you go on IMDb and you put in your zip code, you can actually see nearby theaters playing certain films. So you can go, oh, I didn't even know this theater was playing this. And anyways, I'm going totally away from it. Sheep in the Box is wonderful. It is what Koreeda does best. And what he does best are these really heartfelt, really touching family dramas and what family means. Whether it's a case of these group of people, like in Broker, who are not related entirely, but they come together like a family for this one goal. Or in a case like Monster, where you have this friendship between these two characters, and their relationship is like a family. And Sheep in the Box does this as well. And it's the way that Koreeda writes these films. He allows so much room for nuance and complexity with his characters. Because when this started off, this was telegraphed as something that could easily be cliche. With this film, you have these two parents who have lost their young child, and it takes place in the near future. And this company says we can make these humanoid AI sort of family members who who can come back into your life, and it's like not necessarily replacing like a lost a loved one, but it is like they can kind of help you heal. And I just think about how silly and how stupid this could have gone. How you could have very obvious and very silly explanations of some of the character reactions in this. Of I'm going to be the one character who is on board with it, and I'm going to be the other character who has to monologue about the moral qualms with this. And Koreeda does not do that. It starts off a little bit like that, where the Ma is more open to the idea of this android who is in place of her son, and the father is very receptive of it. There is some good comedy at times, which Koreeda does so well. It's not overstated, but some of the times what the father compares the AI android to, I'll let you see for yourself because I don't want to give away the joke. But then from there, the relationships become far more nuanced, especially with the father. He is having a lot of qualms about it, but not in an obvious way. Not in a way where I see a lesser filmmaker who would have a character need to explain to the audience, well, I'm feeling morally ambiguous about this, and although I see the advantages, I also see the disadvantages. Koreeda is a far more quiet filmmaker. He's a far more empathetic filmmaker, and one of the things he does so well is the relationship between kids, because where the film goes to sort of starts to go away from this family unit into a different family unit. And at first, I thought that was I was like, okay, this can get really silly, but it never does. And when you actually start to figure out kind of what's going on with some of these other characters, it feels so mature and it feels so heartfelt. Where I walked out of this film when the credits came up, and I said, "My gosh, I am just so happy to have been in this theater. I'm so happy to be alive at a time where I get to experience the work like Koreeda." Because I even recently just watched his one of his most known films, Nobody Knows, from I think that's 2004 or 2003, and the way he deals with the almost entirely child cast in that. And that film is inspired partially by a true story, and I looked up a little bit about the true story. The film takes a lighter sort of tone on that, but it's a what could be a very dark and upsetting film, and it is dark and upsetting, but it's very human and it's very empathetic and it's not melodramatic. Koreeda doesn't do melodrama. He is far more of the quiet sort of character, even the character moments, even when characters don't have to say anything. There's one part in Monster that I always think about, and it's when a character just looks at another character, and it's the context of that scene, and somebody else is there. And I'm trying to be kind of vague because I don't want to give away the whole scene. I also don't feel like explaining the context of that. I think if you want to see that film, you need to experience these moments on your own. But just the way he does that without any dialogue is so mature, is so empathetic, and it's just so loving. I think Koreeda is just one of just the great filmmakers. He's just one of these guys where even something like this that hasn't been, wasn't very well received at Cannes. Boy, oh boy, when it was over, I was just like, I was getting teary eyed. I was just like, wow, there's just like one shot, which I think probably should have been the final shot of the film, but it still works. But it is just so touching. And then where the film actually ends, how a character looks at another character. My gosh, man, it just made my heart skip a beat. It was so loving and so mature, and I really, really responded to this film. So, don't let we shouldn't really let any kind of negative or positive press persuade or dissuade you from seeing a film. There's films that people kind of look at. Oh, well, the Rotten Tomato score is this, or this didn't get well received at this festival. I don't, I forgot who it was. It was may have been Eli Roth. I was listening to an interview with him, which, funnily enough, he has a new film out this weekend, which is not getting very positive reviews. But he said something along the lines of, the Rotten Tomato scores and the reviews really don't matter. It's all about, these films that kind of people come back to and stand the test of time. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And I think to a certain extent, it's like, yeah, if you're curious about, if a film is getting, very positive or negative reviews, I mean, it's an interesting kind of curiosity to see. But I look on, you can look on these sites and I see just some real stinkers that I just did not like. That gets 90%, 95%, or a film like this that doesn't get very good reviews, or Her Private Hell, and I end up responding to the most. It's all about how you respond to different art and what it does to you. That aside from just the curiosity on a film's reception, I think it's really important to not kind of go with the crowd and to also have your own kind of take on it. And it's easier said than done to go, well, of course you have your own opinion, of course you have your own say on it. But, there's a lot of films that get sort of, overwhelmingly negative reviews or overwhelmingly positive reviews. And some people, they sort of like, they're like, oh yeah, this is one of the worst films of the year. This is one of the best films of the year. And it's like, do you really believe that, or is it just because this has this reception that it is sort of like the zeitgeist moment where like a really big film, a really popular film comes out, and everyone is like, oh, I love it, and then you have some people who are intentionally contradicting. It's like everybody loves it, so I'm not going to like it. And I think we'll kind of get so caught up in the performative part of it that they forget whether a film really affects them or not. Whether it's a film that's really funny that got, like it doesn't get good reviews, but you're laughing the whole time, or a dramatic film that gets great reviews that does nothing for you. So it's an important thing to remember, and I think that we kind of take for granted in the kind of the contemporary online milieu of every film is the worst. So I just saw, I saw 20 films this year. This one was the worst one and is awful, or it's like. Oh, this is the best film of the year. This is guaranteed to win all the Oscars. And it's like, and then 2 months come, and then no one even remembers it. So that was sort of my long-winded reaction to this film, just because it's just funny the consecutive films of having just seen Her Private Hell and now having just seen Cheap in the Box. And they ended up being two of just my favorite films of the year. And I'm confident will remain on my 50 favorites of the year so far, which, speaking of which, it's actually coming along fairly well. I've been catching up on a couple 2026 titles, and because at the end of the year I end up, I end up kind of falling behind and sort of trying to play catch up, but I have seen a couple of really terrific contemporary 2026 films. I just watched the new film by Francois Ozon, who he puts out a lot of films kind of fast. I just saw his newest film. Well, at that time, his newest film, When Fall Is Coming, last year, and he has a new film out, The Stranger, and it was very good and very mature. So I just wanted to brief kind of talk to that. He's another filmmaker who I really do like. I have to watch some more of his work. I've listened to maybe 3 or 4 of his films, but I've liked all of them that I've seen. But anyways, with that said, let's move on from there. Boy, oh boy, is this coffee still hot or is it getting kind of warm? It's getting a little bit warm. Oh yeah, I pulled this up briefly because I was just kind of curious in terms of you know, the films that are up for Palme d'Or at Cannes. I never really look up what is actually in the running. It's always kind of the ones that get talked about. So I'm looking here on the website just from last year of in competition, and last year the winner was It Was Just an Accident by Jafar Panahi. And I'm looking at the other films here, and I've seen, I would say, most of these. So up for in competition was The Phoenician Scheme by Wes Anderson. That I actually talked about briefly on when I was going through Wes Anderson's filmography an episode or two ago. But Eddington by Ari Aster. I've said that's a really terrific film, very funny. I've been curious to rewatch that because I'm kind of itching to rewatch that. It's very well done, very well made. I thought should have been up for Best Picture nomination. Resurrection by Gann. And interesting film. I was fortunate enough to see this theatrically, and there's a lot I like. There's a lot that I wasn't crazy about. I think Bai Gan is a really terrific filmmaker, um, but it didn't totally work for me, admittedly. Let's see. Oh boy, how am I going to pronounce this? Jeunesse Meres? Have not seen this. Alpha by Julia DeCarno. I just talked about. It didn't totally work for me, but interesting at times. Really like in that film the jumping of time, even if it's not clear. There's a point where there's a lot of the film that's in flashback, and we cut to contemporary day, and there's a point where it actually merges together, and it's really not concerned with letting the audience know, which is very interesting. But there's a lot that I like about that film. It doesn't totally work, but I definitely don't think that Neon should have kind of dumped it like it did. Renoir, which I have not seen. The History of Sound by Oliver Hermanus. I've talked about before. It was one of my favorites last year. Really, really terrific film with Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor and Chris Cooper. La Petite Dernière. This is me trying to pronounce French titles and embarrassing myself, but I have not seen it. What is it? La Petite Dernière. Okay. Seurat by Oliver Lakes. I've talked about that film quite a number of times. That was also one of my favorites of last year. And another one of my favorites from last year, Nouvelle Vague by Richard Linklater. Terrific film. Getting a Criterion very soon. Two Prosecutors by Sergei Loznitsa. I actually just watched that not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago. Liked it quite a bit. Fury, F-U-O-R-I. I have not seen by. I should probably have to say some of these directors' names that I haven't seen. By Mario Martone. The Secret Agent by, oh my gosh, Kleber. I'm not even going to try to say that. Very good. Liked it quite a bit. That got nominated for Best Picture. I think a lot of people saw it. Case 137 by Dominic Mall. Have not seen. Die My Love by Lynn Ramsey. Thought it was excellent. Another one of my favorites of last year. The Mastermind by Kelly Reichardt. Maybe my favorite Kelly Reichardt film. I don't know. I really liked Showing Up as well, Michelle Williams. So who knows? And I'm not even the biggest Kelly Reichardt fan. I've seen most of her films, and I haven't totally responded to them. But The Mastermind and Showing Up I thought were very good. Eagles of the Republic by Tariq Saleh. I have not seen. Sound of Falling by Masha Sholinsky, which I also watched fairly recently and was a little disappointed in. Yeah, it didn't totally work for me. I like maybe about as much as I don't. Romeria by Carla Simone, I've not seen, and then Sentimental Value by Joachim Trier, fantastic film. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see a lot of the titles that get kind of talked about or get brought up, but are not kind of mentioned unless it is the Palme d'Or. Although there are plenty of these that here that are talked about that were nominated for an Academy Award that get kind of talked about, but unless it's one that gets sort of some attention for one reason or another, they're very easy to fall by the wayside. And there's so many films part of the competition, and so many films to see that some are just going to slip through the cracks. But you know, I'm not going to go through all these. Uncertain Regard, those films out of competition, those films midnight screenings and con premieres, special screenings, and those can be, I think, new, contemporary, or older films like restorations, and yeah, no, just fun to kind of look at. Fun to see what films get premiered and then either get part of the general zeitgeist or you don't hear about and you go, I wonder what happened with that film. And there are some here that I have seen, actually about half of these, and I have not seen about the other half. It's interesting, the Uncertain Regard, a lot of these are directors' first films. Let's see, first film, I got My Father's Shadows by Akinola Davis Jr., which I haven't seen. Urchin by Harris Dickinson. That was his first film, one of the best of the year. Eleanor the Great by Scarlett Johansson. Her first film, was not a fan of it. Caravan by Zuzana Kirchnerova. I have not seen that first film. Pillion by Harold Leighton. First film I saw was okay. Aisha Can't Fly Away by Murad Mustafa. First film did not see. The Plague by Charlie Pollinger. First film was great. And then The Chronology of Water by Kristen Stewart. First film I have not seen. I don't know why I'm going through these lists now, so I'm going to stop myself right there and talk about something else here. Boy, oh boy, how did we get into that talk? Well, I know how we did, and it was me trailing off after Sheep of the Box, but either way, let's go from there. There was something else I wanted to talk about, and the book that I wanted to mention was in the other room, so maybe I will hold off on that for now, although I do have some time, but I guess I will kind of talk about um, my fascination with the films from Something Weird video. I've talked about Something Weird on the show before. I think it's when I talked about Fun in Balloon Land, which I think I also mentioned, but that has since got a Blu-ray release, which is wild. Um, it was part of what AGFA are doing now, which are these multi-film Blu-ray sets. AGFA in partnership with Something Weird, because I think it's a good idea to put these films in a set together, because I imagine that if you spend 20, 30 bucks and then you got Fun in Balloon Land, you might be a little upset, but you got 5 films here. The Big Bad Wolf, Fun in Balloon Land, Polly Pockets, The Princess and the Magic Frog, and Kingdom of Crooked Mirrors, the crazy kids video party. I don't know how I got on that, but yeah, no, Something Weird. The book that I'm reading right now is co-written by Michelle. What is her last name? I am forgetting her name. Michelle. Oh my goodness, what? This is incredibly embarrassing. Oh gosh, fun trying to find Michelle Clifford. Baxter. Well, it's Michelle Clifford, who is a co-founder of Something Weird. This book I'm reading, Sleazeward Express, which goes through the films that permeated the cinemas of 42nd Street, goes through talking about the theaters, the different kinds of films shown, the different specialty films that some of the theaters would show. Some of them were more into the nudie cuties, some were into the adult stuff. And actually, what brought me up, and I'll talk about that book in another time, but one of the things that, interestingly enough, came from Something Weird, and then it just happened to be a coincidence that I was reading this book, was a fascinating documentary from 1971 called Red, White, and Blue, which is funny because I wrote this down as a film to watch, and there's a couple films called Red, White, and Blue, and I could not for the life of me remember which one I wanted to watch. But this one popped up, and I said, regardless of whether or not I actually wanted, or I was actually aware of this, um, I did want to check this out because this is 1971, directed by Beverly and Ferd Sebastian, and it's about President Nixon's Commission on Obscenity, about the censoring of pornography at this point. And what's fascinating about this is that, so this is 1971, filmed probably a year or so beforehand, talking to people on the street about the censorship that's coming through with pornography, with the nudie cuties, the softcore stuff, and this would be right before the wave of porno chic and the burgeoning hardcore film market in the 1970s. This is right before Wakefield Poole's Boys in the Sand, the prolific gay adult film, and then Gerard Damiano's Deep Throat, achieving international success, became a pop culture, buzz, and sort of changed the way that, film censorship, hardcore pornography was shown. And that's all. It's just interesting right before all this happened. I mean, those were not the first hardcore films, but the point is that this was at a point where you have I Am Curious Yellow coming from Sweden, and people were talking about the sexuality in that film. And people, the distribution of that film in the States of like, oh man, this is this big art film, but it's got a lot of sex in it, and it's got, shocking at the time, flaccid penis being kissed, and it's like, my gosh. And then you actually watch the film. I mean, I think people kind of talk about as much, or maybe not even as much as the sexuality in that film. I think people kind of don't talk about the film enough itself, and I Am Curious Yellow is more of an interesting film in context than actually sitting down and watching it. I've seen that film twice now, and I can't remember for the life of me if I've seen I Am Curious Blue. But it is a film. It's a Swedish film directed by Vilgot Sjöman, and it's a bit of a slog at times. It's how do I want to put this? There's a lot of jumping in narrative, a lot of, you could say it seemingly feeling like improvised narration, but it's not. It feels more specific than that. But we're going with these characters and sort of their Lena's viewpoints of the world and the changing shifts in Sweden, and it's yeah, you watch it for the context. Actually, I don't know if this was ever, even when it was released, considered a great film. I think the idea of it and the content of it has the content of certainty has definitely overshadowed the film itself, but it is worth watching, I would say, especially just for the history of it. But yeah, Red, White, and Blue does not have, I don't think, even much of a release. And I'm not saying this is a great film or anything. It's more of a film to watch in context. There's a lot of great marquees in the film, a lot of great, I love hearing people talk about the, films of the time, and it's funny. It's like nothing really is changed from, you look at the 70s and the 80s and all these groups who, think that they know what's best for you, saying what you should and shouldn't be able to watch. In the 70s, it's like, these conservative sort of government being like, well, these films are immoral, you shouldn't watch this. And then in the 80s, you have these sort of feminist left-leaning groups being like, oh, you shouldn't watch this. This is bad for you. And it's sort of like, it goes in cycles. Everyone thinks they're not guilty of telling you what they think is good for you. And then until they're the ones in charge and they go, well, you shouldn't be watching this because of this reason and this reason. It's like, who are you? Who are you to say what we legally cannot watch? But preach it to the choir on this one, and coffee is finally warm. I'm going to end this episode and drink it. So anyways, it's a lovely day out. Just as I said that, the sun is out again. It's beautiful. So much to be done. So we're gonna take the day, we're gonna grab it by the balls, so to speak, and we're gonna make it really worth every second. So thank you guys so much for listening. Take care. New episode of Peephole Pictures coming soon. Got to get that work done. So I also appreciate you guys checking out the last episode. Been seeing some good review count on that. So thank you so much. All the best and take care.